Stellar Fundraising Auctions presents Black Tie and Tails, brought to you by Greater Giving and Sojourn Ventures, and featuring fundraising auctioneers Greg Quiroga and Devon Bell. Welcome to Black Tie and Tails, where we're going to take you behind the scenes of the wonderful world of fundraising auctions to tell tales of triumph and tragedy. My name is Greg Quiroga. This is my co-host Devon Bell.
Hello, all.
And this episode, we're focusing a little bit on the tragedy, and the reason, these events that we do. I open my second guideline to fundraising auctions is this is an uncontrolled environment. Right? Mistakes can happen. Things can go wrong. And I always say, if and when I make a mistake, I'll reopen the auction lot. But sometimes...
And then I say, and anyone has a problem with that, we'll switch you out to water right away.
Right away. Yeah. Cancel your Uber. Make sure your table doesn't have dessert. Tear up your valet ticket. There's all sorts of fun threats that I make, and it's always an interesting, right? And oftentimes the reaction I get from the crowd is that exact one of like, what is this guy? That's not funny. And then I'm like, oh great, now I've started off on the wrong foot, just like this podcast. So, but oftentimes, like the chaotic nature of our events, like sometimes it feels like a tightrope, where you're walking this tightrope, and the net might not be so visible, and things happen.
Yeah. Things happen with every aspect of it, right? Things happen, and sometimes it's a minor inconvenience, and sometimes it's a life or death situation.
Literally, and one of the things that. I mean, the definition of emergency is that you're not planning on it, right? You're not planning for it. You're not looking for this to happen. And so this episode, we're going to talk about different types or levels of emergencies and things that we've seen. And then the first story that we're going to tell is actually it's a shared experience, because Devon was spotting with me at an auction that we were doing for an animal organization in Napa at Raymond Vineyards, lovely vineyard, part of the Jean-Charles Boisset collection of vineyards. A lovely back area, outdoor space, the lights hanging over, and just this really great vibe for a summertime event.
Late summer, beautiful weather, real nice.
One of the sad notes, and this isn't the emergency, but it's a sad note worth mentioning, was that Joan Rivers was slated to be honoree, to be there. Joan was a big supporter of this organization, and she passed away the week before this. So, I mean, we've pinpointed the date and time when this happened. And everybody decided that the show must go on, right? That Joan loved this organization and supported it, and they need to raise the money. I mean, that's often the theme at these fundraising auctions, is the organization is dependent upon your support in this moment right now. And so they decided to go ahead and do the auction. And so we're doing the event, and uncontrolled environment, like we said at the onset, and a lot of what's going on, there's a lot of drinking, there's a lot of talking, there's a lot of eating, and sometimes I marvel at the things that my body is able to do. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, breathing, like, oh, it's a thing, and you think about it too much and it goes wrong. And sometimes I marvel at the fact that we can have all these people gathered and eating, and everything goes until it doesn't. And so someone at one of the back tables we're doing the auction, right? We're going, everything's going, auction's doing just fine. And all of a sudden somebody comes running up, and it's up there in the list of words you never want to hear as an auctioneer is there a doctor in the house?
Right. I can remember that moment, and it was confusing and jarring, and it was a thing. It's
shocking, and obviously flip the mic off. And one of the things you learn from experience doing things like this. This isn't the first time at an event that somebody has choked on their food, and that's what was happening. There was a person in the room who was choking on their food. And so one of the things you learn is to react quickly, to not try to minimize the situation too much, to make sure that we're giving them their privacy as they're suffering this emergency. But also, is there a doctor in the house? Is there somebody skilled at helping in this situation who has been through this before? Because I think professionals are good at they're better at their job than amateurs, especially when there's a lot of pressure for things to go right. And in this case, it somebody who was skilled in this, got to the person. We did wind up calling emergency and 911 because you just want to make sure that they're all right. But by the time the paramedics arrived, or were there paramedics on site?
I can still remember that at one point it wasn't just the pretty hanging strings of lights; it was the flashing red and white of emergency vehicles. So kind of throughout the
EMTs
space.
arrived. Yeah. EMTs arrived. They didn't have paramedics there. EMTs arrived, and by the time the EMTs arrived, the person was fine. Or at least the food blockage had been removed and the person was okay. But what happens to the auction as a whole is suddenly there's this, like, the vibe in the room gets real quiet. Everybody gets real worried. Everybody's instinct is to focus on the person who's going through the emergency, and that probably isn't helpful for them.
Yeah, it's a different kind of losing the crowd. It's not losing the crowd because it dissipates away. It's losing the crowd because they're all pointing in this other direction.
It goes in focus. And one of the things I've learned in that moment is to try and pull that focus away from whoever's going through that emergency to buy them whatever modicum of privacy can be had in that setting. And also hopefully to make it a little easier for the people who are working with or on them to not feel the pressure of the moment and talk amongst yourselves and let's give it a moment. And we took a break in the auction, and it was thankfully for the person involved, a momentary break, because once the food block was out, and then the EMTs came and they're like, no, I don't want to go anywhere. I'm having a good time. Like, they wanted to go right.
Where's my drink?
Yeah, totally. Where's my drink? And the EMT was like, we really think we should check you out. And the person reluctantly agreed to submit themselves to being, given a once over by the EMTs, and everything was fine. And it's an introduction to what can go wrong, right? And thankfully thankfully the worst didn't happen in that case, but it definitely, like you said, it's one of those interesting ways you lose the crowd. It isn't they dissipate, they focus, they get really focused,
but in a different direction.
And not on the fundraising. And thankfully the team running that event had an emergency plan in place, because the time from us hearing that to, like you said, the red and blue lights flashing in the back of the room wasn't long.
No.
It was pretty darn quick. And that means that somebody on their team was prepared to act immediately. And I think in this type of emergency, in this type of situation, that is probably one of the biggest takeaways, is to have somebody calm of mind but fast of fingers on the dial, or even better yet, to have emergency personnel on site to be able to respond to something like this. Should this, universe not happen.
Yeah, I thought you did a really good job, because I don't think it's appropriate to just plow through like it never happened. And I don't think it's appropriate to let everything grind to a complete halt and now we're not going to finish the event because of this. And I thought you rode the line pretty well. Like you said, you gave some time. You didn't pretend it didn't happen, but the show must go on.
Yeah, the show must go on. In that case, the show did go on, and foreshadowing, we'll get to another show that didn't in a little bit. But first off, let's thank our sponsors, because Black Tie and Tails is brought to you by our partners, Sojourn Ventures. When your auction is in need of some international travel, check out Sojourn Ventures. Sojourn curates trips to Italy, Bali, and now Spain, all at reasonable consignment prices. They offer over a dozen, that's more than 12, over a dozen curated packages that include round-trip airport transfers. So all you got to do is get there, and they get you to where you want to be from there. Full-body massages.
Yes, please.
Daily breakfasts, in-home chef's dinners. They offer vineyard tours in Italy. They can get you in behind the scenes. They offer... in Bali, they have tours of some of the amazing shrines, the water shrine, everything. They offer all sorts of add-ons that you can add. Your buyers will enjoy top-level concierge service and two full years to redeem their trip, all at reasonable consignment prices. Check out sojournventurestravel.com or look for the link in the bio of this podcast. And so that that emergency is more of the obvious kind of emergency. Like, that's an obvious kind of emergency, but sometimes the red alert that's going to have an impact is, I want to say, almost more subtle or nuanced, or maybe not so life-threatening.
Yeah. Oh, so I'm going to tell like in Devon's case.
As in that one time about that thing you told me about before we started.
Talk about that one thing, remember? Yeah.
Can you talk fast?
Emergency. All right. So I was doing an event for an organization in Napa area, and the venue was
I think you can name it.
It was a CIA. It was the Culinary Institute of America, and it's a fabulous space. If you haven't been there, it's beautiful, very Hogwartsian sort of mansion, and the space for the venue was great.
St. Helena.
Yeah,
the one all the way up north of the valley. Right?
Yeah,
so you got different levels and
the staircases all move. Yeah, like
windows overlooking Krug Winery across the street.
It's just magnificent space. But something to note there is that it was happening in the context of a full seated dinner, and it's the students who are making the meal, right? So kind of the equivalent of getting your haircut at beauty school. You probably get some sort of discount or something, but you're also getting the students to do it.
There's some message in there, in terms of like, the cause maybe, or at least within the CIA. But on the flip side, how many people?
I'm going to say it wasn't huge. I'm going to say maybe 200 people, 10 tops.
You and I try to cook dinner for 200 people, and it is not going to be on time.
Well, that's true, but I also don't have 6 stoves in my house. So anyway, I can't tell you exactly what was going on in the kitchen, but I don't think it was good.
Okay.
And we have
smoke billowing.
Dishes are done, man. So we have our timeline, and we're going along in the live program, and as I think is appropriate, and I always argue for, is it's happening in the context of the meal,
right?
And so those times aren't exact; those can be squishy. It's when the meal comes out, and the meal's not ready. So we do keep going on our thing, and the meal's still not ready. Okay. And I think this is one of the lessons of this one is that the organization didn't do a great job of adapting, and they kind of clung to like, no, we're going to go do this next part when the meal comes out.
Right.
And I don't know what fires, literal or figurative, they were putting out in the kitchen, but the meal, the entree started coming out, and there's another 10-15 minutes of 10 minutes of just putting down dishes. It came out 45 minutes after it was supposed to. And much of that time, because the organization didn't kind of roll with the punches and move along anyway, they clung to, hey, after the meal comes out is when we're going to do this part. And so there was a lot of dead air. There was maybe like an episode of Hell's Kitchen where they keep showing the shots of the guests looking more and more irked that their food's not there. Everyone's getting hangry.
So there's nothing happening on stage. There's nothing happening on the plates, and the crowd is just drinking and getting angry.
That sounds right.
Which from that's its own emergency. Like that's its own red alert. Like as soon as you like we talk about you talk about, you can hear when the crowd, like you can hear when it's the perfect moment to go. Yeah. Right. Like
everyone's bought in.
Yeah.
Everyone's pointing the same way.
And at a certain point, like I can imagine hearing in that room, like the moment to go, and then it does that Doppler and it's just way in the past.
Yeah. And I think it was probably about, out of those 45 minutes, I think it was about 8 minutes in that I went, we should go.
Yeah.
It's like, don't worry about, we should just, whenever the other stuff happens, it happens. Yeah. But we should just go. Yeah. Like everything that came up to here is all dissipating into nothing. Yeah. We're going to be starting from scratch from kind of a engagement standpoint. And so, the meals eventually did come out, and we plowed ahead. But I think that the event success and the enjoyment by the crowd would have been much more so had they rolled with the punches. Like things like that are going to happen,
right?
And we got to take it as it comes.
Well, and it's a matter of being able to identify what constitutes an emergency from the standpoint of fundraising. Right. If the ultimate goal is you're there to raise money for a cause, and that is, obviously hearkening back to the last episode, you want people to have fun and at the end of the night want to come back. But if you're not going to feed them for 45 minutes, why not entertain them with an auction and a fund a need to at least make sure that you're hitting the philanthropic goal? Because it's always a gamble to wait till after dinner to feed people, or wait till to wait till after dinner to feed people, to wait till after dinner to do the fundraising. I don't think he's heard of second dinner, Pippin, to wait till after dinner to do your fundraising. But to wait till dinner's 45 minutes late is its own red alert.
Yeah. And there's like with so many things in this world, there is no right way.
Right.
It's art, not science. And at the same time, I think we should have just charged ahead, regardless of the emergency that was happening in the kitchen. Someone's choking on their food. You don't want to say, well, screw them, we're charging ahead, right? Like there's a, like you said, what is the level of the emergency and how do we integrate that unfortunate eventuality into the flow of our night?
Good tie-in. Why don't you hit our next?
Indeed, I will. Black Tie and Tails is brought to you by our partner, Greater Giving. Elevate your nonprofit's fundraising efforts with Greater Giving, a trusted global payments company. Greater Giving has been empowering organizations nationwide for over 2 decades. Whether you want to simplify your event coordination, boost your volunteer efficiency, maximize the funds raised both online and offline, or all of those things, Greater Giving will help you explore comprehensive solutions and access free educational materials. Find out more at greatergiving.com today.
Or look in the link of the bio of this podcast. Greater Giving, worked with Greater Giving for 20 years. Appreciate them, love them. Shout out to Michelle Holman and the team. Our next story, I think we kind of have to label it the horror story of the week, just because it in the context of emergencies and fundraising, it is horrific. It's the story that I don't tell at fundraising events, that I don't tell anybody when we're within, weeks or months. This is the fundraising auction story I tend to not tell to people planning fundraising auctions, because it's the story you don't want to have happen at your event.
Yeah, it's, when we talk about everything that happens at the event, it often says, well, okay, it's not life or death. Except sometimes it is. And to set the context for this story. So I'd been working with an organization for a few years, and I'd been an agent of change. I'd been trying to make, when I first started working with them, they're like, do you think we need tables? It's a food and tasting event, and people are just standing around. I'm like, I think if you put some tables out, people will probably sit at them. So the first year they put down tables, and people were like, oh my God, a place to sit. And they just ran in and immediately all the table space was taken within the first 5 minutes. Like, wow, that really worked. So we progressed to there being tables for everybody. They're being shared.
Shocking. And people sat. And so eventually we get to the place where everybody who buys a ticket has a space for a table, and we've got a program, and people are seated, and the auction, this is the year that the auction is taking off, in the past, we'd been struggling to get bidding going. And in this year, all of a sudden, the first auction lot does, it's the instant gratification. It does fine. The second auction lot, there's 16 auction lots and a paddle raise, fund a need, make a difference, meant to be somewhere in the midst of all of that.
That's
right?
going to be an hour for all that. Yeah.
We do an hour of fundraising. And so we're on lot number 3. It's the dinner in your house, right? This organization was food and chef related, so it's going to have a chef or chefs come to your house and prepare food, and it takes off, right? It transcends. It's going great, and there's a bidder in the back of the room who's in at 28, and then somebody else is in at 3, and that bidder's in at 32, and somebody else is in at 35. He's in at 38, and we're back to them at 4, and they're in at 4, and back to him at 42, and he says, "No, done, great, sold, $4,000," and the crowd goes wild. and I'm like flipping back then I had a paper script. I'm flipping the script and getting ready to go. And a spotter comes running up and says, there's an emergency. We need a doctor in the back of the room. And having been through people choking on their food before, I'm like, oh, okay. Is there a doctor in the house? We have an emergency in the back of the room. And I look and see the previous bidder who'd come in second place is lying on the ground. And suddenly, like, I get this cold sweat and like this, and I said, and I'm like, oh, we need a doctor in the back of the house. And I said, and I'm like, okay, everybody, like focus here. Let's get everybody's attention in the front of the room. And the next time I look, the auction chair is performing CPR and chest compressions on the bidder in the back of the room. And it has gotten really serious really fast. And so everybody, we're going to take a break from the auction. Now is a good opportunity to go refill your cocktail if you need, or go to the bathroom. But we're going to take a moment, please divert your attention from the back of the room. But it's kind of hard to do so because there's, the auction chair, Alex is back there and he's working, performing CPR, and it feels like a really long time. San Francisco emergency personnel, they don't show up for, feels like 8 to 10 minutes. I mean, it wasn't the nap event we did felt way quicker than this. And maybe it's because there's no progress happening, right? Like he's performing CPR and the bidder is and everybody's like, oh my, and
everyone's waiting for he's okay. He's okay.
And it's not coming. And you say like, oh, that tension is building. That tension is building. And finally it hits a plateau where everybody's like, oh, this feels really bad. And I've come back and made a couple of announcements, but now I flip my mic. I'd flip my mic off and I'd kind of sat on the edge of the stage and I was drinking some water, talking with the front table, like just trying to like engage respectfully and peacefully. And finally, I'm like, I need to go. And so I need to go chat with some people and see what we're going to do, because everything has just changed, right? Everything has just changed. And I go find the development director and I ask her, I said, so, and she's like, yeah, no, it doesn't, it doesn't look good. And the EMTs finally show up. And I don't mean to say that in any disparaging way. Traffic in San Francisco sucks, and who knows how far they were away, and who knows how long it actually took them to get there. It felt like forever. It could have been. I was
going to say that. Could have been. I'm sure they were fast, but those minutes are hours.
Yeah, it felt like forever. And they get there, but they do perform CPR. They get him on a gurney and get the gurney up, and they do perform CPR for another good solid 8 minutes to 12 minutes, long enough for us to have multiple conversations. At this point, it's probably been 15 to 20 minutes since lot 3 sold. And I go to the development director.
The flow of the whole thing is just...
Oh, the whole... Yeah. Everything has changed. There is a pall hanging in the room because it becomes really obvious that the bidder in the back of the room has died, right? Like that is, and it's like, that is super heavy. And I come up with like what I think is the right path forward. But I want to bounce it off of somebody. So I call somebody who had been doing this for a long time. I call my mentor and I'd say, hey, here's what's going on. I know you're on vacation. I've got 2 minutes. Here's what's happened. Here's what my idea is. Blah, 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 blah. He says, your sounds good. I said, great, click. And so I go to the development director and I said, okay, well, and at this point, the head of that religious organization, so like the archbishop of the diocese, if you will, is saying this event is over. Everybody needs to go home. We need to just wrap things up and call it a day. And I look at the development director and I'm like, how badly do you need the money? And she's like, if we don't raise our X amount tonight, people are going to starve, right? We're not going to be able to feed people. And I take her, and at a certain point, somebody says, "What do you want to do?" And she looks at me and she says, "Whatever Greg says," which is heavy responsibility.
No pressure.
No pressure, but also like an honor to be respected that much. And so we wind up divided into two camps. I say, look, the auction is obviously over, right? There's no way I can get back on stage.
And that's a joyous hooting and hollering thing.
There's no way I can get back on stage and
in that
encourage people to like, hey, let's bid against each other and like really celebrate.
Vacation house in Puerto Vallarta.
I said, the auction's obviously over. And that we can't. I said, but if you end the evening right now and send your crowd home without giving them the opportunity to do anything else, your event becomes the event where Nick died.
Which it'll be anyway.
It'll be anyway.
Right, that'll be the last taste in their mouth.
I think it's important to give them the opportunity to make something positive come from this tragedy. I think we have to do the fund a need. And it comes down to like I said, we're divided into two camps. It's me and let's just call him a bishop. Me and the bishop are at opposite ends, and the bishop's saying everybody should go home. And so finally we have like, and I'm not saying that the bishop's coming from a bad place. The bishop was just like, in this tragedy, we need to honor the fallen and call it and go. And go ahead.
I was going to say, it's a tough situation because if you just leave, that's weird and awkward and prickly. And if you stay and run the fund a need, that's weird and awkward and prickly. It's going to be hard either way.
Yeah, it would definitely was going to be a balancing act. But we have enough conversations where I am very adamant about feeling the need to do something. Right. And we as people, we like to like, especially guys, but as people, we like to do something, right? Like we don't want, like if something happens, we want to be able to react. We want to be able to react in a positive way. So we all agree that the path forward is to do the fund a need, but we have to wait until the EMTs have wheeled Nick out. And
there's a visual,
right? Yeah, and it's like, please, nobody look at the gurney as it's being wheeled out of the room. Squeaky wheel.
Is it covered? Is he covered up?
Yeah. Like the whole thing at this point. And the bishop follows him out, and so we decide, okay, well, now's the time to go because if we wait any longer, right now, like as soon as he's gone, like it's kind of like, okay. Deep breath, and here's what we're going to do. And Alex, the chair, was good friends with him. They were on the board together. There was a deep relationship there, and we all get on stage. You talk about crowds that are hard to quiet down and get focused. This is not one of them. Right? This crowd is right there, like, and everybody's kind of shells, like, what do we do? Like you can see the looks on the crowd, like, what are we going to do? And so Alex, the chair, we all go out, like I get the crowd quieted. I say, look, and then Alex speaks for a moment. And we say basically like, he was a big supporter of the organization. He was big on the board. Let's honor him. Like this was his favorite organization. Let's honor him by turning this moment into a positive. And right as we're about to start calling, I'm like just about to go back and start calling paddles, the bishop comes running back and says, let's have a moment of silence for our fallen brother. And it was like, I get it. I totally get it. And he's coming from the place where he is used to operating, and it all worked out, but it was just like, it was just one more fit and start in what was, and my personal challenge is not the challenge on this at all. Right. So it's like, okay, great, bishop, do the thing. And we go. And so basically I said was like, he was a big supporter of the organization. He wanted to see this organization succeed, and now the onus is on us to ensure that that happens. And they wound up having the most successful fund a need they've ever had. And they wound up
bittersweet,
but they wound up turning tragedy into triumph because it gave the crowd an opportunity to do something, to make some positivity happen. But it was still really heavy. I mean, I talked to people who'd been at his table, and they kind of clapping, and on a personal level, it was incredibly heavy because here's this person who's been bidding. Right, I've had this relationship where I'm encouraging this person to act. and I have been trying to get them hyped up, and then they have a heart attack, and I carried it. I've told this story before in front of a large crowd, and I said I felt personally responsible, and somebody in the crowd laughed, and I'm like, no, but it's not funny. Like, I felt personally responsible for this guy's death for a year.
I was trying to hype him up, maybe not quite that much.
Right. Yeah. And so a year later, and honestly, like, I carried this with me for a year thinking like, oh my God, I feel so guilty. And a year later, we're back there doing it again. And one of the guys that had been at his table comes to me after that auction the next year. And he's like, oh, so, and there's always the like, you do a great job. And I'm like, yeah, but he's like, hey, I just wanted you to know one thing. He's like that Nick died doing what he loved. He died supporting an organization that was near and dear to him. And when they went through and did the autopsy, the conclusion was that the heart attack was instantaneous and unavoidable. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. So if he hadn't been here with us, that he would have been at home alone eating a meal. So the fact that he got to pass in the midst of friends, supporting an organization that he deeply cared for, was great. And he said, and I want you to know that his last words were, "Can you believe that thing sold for $4,000?" Which again is bittersweet.
Yeah, BIDDR sweet.
No,
and well, I think that it was audacious. It was a bit of a gutsy play to say, let's run the fund and need anyway. And there was no right way. So however you did it is how you did it. But I think that your instinct was good there, because people were going to be stunned and numb and shell shocked no matter what. Mm-hmm. And so they got to be numb and stunned and shell shocked. And like you said, do something and share a moment as a crowd. And, I use this line as we transition from the hooting and hollering and the having fun and the ha-ha of the auction to the fun and need. I'll say that was a lot of fun, but let's take a moment and remember why it is that we're here. And wow, in your case, let's take a moment and remember why they were here is like writ large.
Yeah. Yeah, really. One of the things I've been doing lately is just everybody take a deep breath. Like, let's all take a deep breath, refocus. Okay. And move forward. And I, throughout my career, I've been unapologetically a fundraiser. I will always err towards the side of helping the clients we work with raise more money. And in this case, very specifically, like that it wasn't without apology, because I definitely felt the tension of the decision in the moment, but yeah. I also felt that development director's pain. Like, she's like, if I don't raise the money, I don't hit my budget. And if I don't hit my budget, negative repercussions happen. And I think one of the things that makes us so good at our jobs is I carry that with me every single event. It's just that in that case, it was really, really stark contrast between decisions.
Yeah, it's kind of a throwaway line of like, he would have wanted us to na, but in this case, he really would have wanted us to na.
Yeah, it's true. So, and I think the takeaways from it, like all of these emergencies, there are takeaways, and I'll remind everybody that these takeaways can be found in an accompanying blog post on our website at stellarsf.com. But I think the takeaways are, first, to borrow from Douglas Adams, don't panic.
And carry a towel.
It doesn't hurt to have a towel, but don't panic, but act quickly, right? And unless it is an emergency that is demanding evacuation, keep the audience calm, right? Let's just try to like this is a thing. We're all in it together, but let's not lose sight of let's not lose our sanity in the moment.
Keep them calm. Unless it requires evacuation, then you just scream, "Run for your life." Run for your lives. And
no, I mean, you still want to be calm, but I think at that point, okay, point taken. As a fly has entered the chat, this will make for a fun video. Give people their space and their privacy. Like, if somebody's going through an emergency, it's in a crowd like that. Like, emergencies are invasive and embarrassing enough. To have one in a crowd must be really, really just abhorrent and terrifying, and being in a crowd probably like adds to the emergency for some people. So I think anything that one can do to give people their space to have this negative moment is important.
Right.
But also for people planning events, it's good to hope nothing bad happens, but don't bank on it. Have a plan.
Yeah, and I don't know how comprehensive your plan has to be for the grim specter of death itself, but your story goes to show that you just never know what's going to happen.
At least have somebody with a cell phone that has reception prepared to dial 911. You don't have to have it pre-dialed or anything, but at least have somebody who, if something goes down, that's the person who's going to act. Right. Contact, and that was the next point. Or, some events even have ambulances or EMTs on site.
Yeah.
I did an event recently at the Paramount Theater in Austin, Texas, and Joan Jett was the performer, which, A, rock on, but B, there was an EMT downstairs. And I'm like, oh, you weren't here last year, were you? And she's like, oh, I'm in Joan Jett's rider. Right? Joan Jett's rider says, have an EMT on site.
Okay.
Event you do. Yay, Joan Jett. And I think the final big takeaway is be prepared to adapt quickly, right?
So, some writers say I need Avion and flowers, and some say we need an emergency vehicle. We need an emergency vehicle there.
Have you seen her keyboardist? I mean, awesome band. Totally. They rocked it.
Yeah.
But none of us are getting any younger. Thank you, listeners. Yeah, the length of this podcast, you're not getting any younger either. So thank you for joining us for this episode of Black Tie and Tales. You can find our podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube, and all of your favorite podcast distribution channels. You can also find it online at blacktieandtales.com. And be sure to tune in next time for Decor Dreams and Nightmares. Centerpieces ahoy.